This is a story about a haunting in the Appalachian forest, an unknown supernatural haunting. Before we start, please hit like and subscribe for more stories like this. The first warning came from a man who knew those mountains better than anyone, and still, none of them listened. Rick had been talking about the trip for almost a month, the kind of deep woods camping trip people only brag about after they make it home. He was 22, restless, strong from long hikes and weekend hunting trips, and he had that dangerous confidence young men get when the forest has been kind to them too many times. Ethan was 24, quieter, more careful, but he loved the outdoors just as much. Fishing at sunrise, hunting trails that vanished into laurel thickets, sitting beside a fire until the stars looked close enough to touch, that was the life he trusted. So when Rick said they should go farther than the marked campgrounds, farther than the families, farther than the weekend hikers, Ethan agreed before Rick even finished the sentence. Then Gabbie heard about it. She was 21, Rick's girlfriend, and she had grown up loving the same things they did: the smell of smoke on a jacket, the hush of a morning trail, the simple peace of cooking over flame. When Rick tried to tell her it might be rough, she smiled like he had just invited her twice. "Good," she told him, while folding her rain jacket into her pack, "then it sounds like a once-in-a-lifetime adventure." They drove into the Appalachian Mountains on a bright morning, when the trees still looked friendly and the highway seemed to promise an easy weekend. The farther they went, though, the more the sky changed. Blue thinned into gray, gray sank into the ridges, and by the time the road narrowed into gravel, a soft drizzle was tapping at the windshield. Near the last ranger station, a man stepped out from under the porch roof and watched them unload. His name was Donald Mercer, 43 years old, a park ranger for more than 20 years, with tired eyes, a weathered face, and the kind of patience that comes from telling people the same warning and watching them ignore it. He had seen lost hikers, bear damage, lightning strikes, flooded trails, injured hunters, and men who came out of the woods with their pride broken. He walked toward them slowly, one hand on his belt, rain beating on the brim of his hat. "You folks camping beyond Laurel Sink?" he asked. Rick answered too quickly. "That's the plan." Donald looked at their packs, then at the ridge hidden behind the curtain of rain. "You got a satellite phone?" Ethan glanced at Rick. Rick shrugged. "Cell phones should catch something on the higher ridge." "No," Donald said, not unkindly, "they won't." Gabbie tried to soften the moment with a smile. "We are not trying to be reckless, Ranger. We hike all the time." Donald nodded, but his eyes stayed on the trees. The mountain does not care how often you hike. Weather shifts fast up there, sound gets strange in the hollers, and after dark, people start trusting what they hear. That is usually when they make mistakes. Ethan shifted his pack. "You saying there is something out there?" Donald looked at him for a long second. "I am saying, if the forest goes quiet, completely quiet, no bugs, no birds, no frogs, no wind in the leaves, you pack up and leave. You do not wait to find out why." Rick laughed once, trying to keep the mood light, but Donald did not laugh with him. By noon, the three friends were climbing under dripping branches, following an old trail that looked more like a scar through the woods than a path. By late afternoon, the drizzle had thickened, the fog had lowered, and the sun became nothing but a pale stain above the treetops. They found a flat clearing near a creek bed, surrounded by hemlocks, rhododendron, and old oaks twisted by years of mountain wind. Rick pitched his tent near the fire ring, Gabbie set theirs beside a mossy log, and Ethan placed his a little farther away, close enough to talk, but far enough for privacy. They were tired, wet, and hungry, so the fire felt like a blessing when it finally caught. Smoke lifted into the fog, sparks breathed upward, and for a while, the woods seemed normal again. Rick passed Gabbie a tin cup of coffee. Ethan stirred a pot of beans and laughed at how bad the first night's dinner already looked. Then, all at once, the forest stopped. No crickets. No frogs. No dripping water. No wing beats. Not even the whisper of rain through the canopy. The silence was so complete, Gabbie heard Rick swallow. Ethan slowly lowered the spoon. "Do you hear that?" Gabbie whispered. Rick looked around the black wall of trees beyond the firelight, and for the first time that day, his confidence left his face. Ethan said, very softly, "I don't hear anything." And somewhere beyond the clearing, deep in the fog, something exhaled. Nobody slept well that first night, although each of them pretended they did. Rick told Gabbie the sound had probably been a deer blowing through its nose, or maybe a bear moving downwind of the camp. Ethan agreed, because agreeing felt better than saying what all three of them knew. The breathing had not moved like an animal. It had stayed in one place, heavy and patient, as if something stood just beyond the firelight and waited to be noticed. Morning came pale and wet, with fog dragging through the trees like torn cloth. The camp looked harmless in daylight. The tent still stood. The backpacks were dry beneath their covers. The creek whispered again, and birds called somewhere up the ridge. Rick made coffee and said, "See, nothing happened." Gabbie looked toward the woods. "That does not mean nothing was here." Ethan crouched near the edge of camp, studying the mud. "No tracks." Rick walked over. "From what?" "From anything," Ethan said. "If it was a bear, deer, coyote, anything heavy enough to breathe like that, there should be tracks." They searched the wet ground around the clearing, but there were only their own boot prints, pressed deep and messy near the tents. Beyond those, the mud was smooth. By mid-morning, Rick insisted they go on the hike they had planned. Sitting at camp, he said, would only let their imaginations rot. Ethan wanted to check the weather, but no phone could find a signal. Gabbie looked uncertain, yet she did not want to be the one who made them turn back. So they packed water, a little food, one flashlight, and Ethan's pocket knife, then followed a faint game trail into thicker woods. The Appalachian forest changed after the first mile. The trees grew closer. The fog settled lower. Green moss covered stones like old blankets, and the trail twisted through laurel tunnels so dense that Rick had to push branches aside with both hands. Every few minutes, something cracked behind them. At first, they stopped and listened. Nothing. Then they walked again. Another crack, farther back, matching their pace. "Probably a branch falling," Rick said. "No wind," Gabbie answered. Ethan looked over his shoulder, and his voice came out thin. "It stops when we stop." They tried to move quietly after that, but the forest seemed to move with them. A scrape came from the left. A low clicking sound came from the right. Once, from far up the slope, there came a sound like a woman crying into her hands, but it stretched too long, rose too high, and ended in a chattering shriek that made Gabbie grab Rick's sleeve. Rick raised his voice, trying to sound brave. "Hey! Whoever is out there, that's enough." The woods answered with silence. Then, from behind them, in Ethan's voice, something said, "That's enough." Ethan went white. Rick spun around. "What did you say?" "I didn't," Ethan whispered. "I swear to God, I didn't." Gabbie backed into Rick. "We need to go back." Nobody argued. The hike back felt longer, and stranger, because the woods refused to look the same. Trees they had passed once appeared again in front of them. The same broken branch hung over the trail 3 different times. The creek, which should have been to their right, murmured from the left, then from behind, then from nowhere at all. By the time they found their clearing again, it was late afternoon, and the fog had thickened into a white wall around camp. For one beautiful second, relief hit them all at once. Then Ethan saw his tent. It had been torn open, not ripped by claws, not shredded by teeth, but pulled apart as if invisible hands had gone through everything he owned in a slow, angry search. His sleeping bag was outside, soaked in mud. His clothes had been scattered into the trees. His flashlight lay broken near the fire ring. His food bag had not been eaten, only opened and emptied into a perfect circle around the tent. Rick stared at it. "There." Ethan looked at the mud around his ruined shelter. "Where are the tracks?" Gabbie walked closer, trembling now. "There are no bite marks." Ethan lifted one of his shirts from the ground. It had been folded neatly, sleeve over sleeve, the way his mother used to fold laundry when he was a kid. His lips parted, but no sound came out. Rick tried to speak, but before he could, something tapped twice on the back of Ethan's tent pole. Tap. Tap. All 3 of them turned. The tent was empty. They should have left while there was still light, but fear does strange things to people in the wilderness. Rick did not want to admit he had led them into danger. Ethan did not want to walk through those woods again with dusk coming down. Gabbie wanted to leave more than anything, but she also knew they had no satellite phone, no clear trail, no warm clothing beyond what they were wearing, and no idea how far the fog had twisted their path. So they made the worst decision frightened people can make. They stayed one more night. Rick built the fire twice as high as before, feeding it wet branches until smoke rolled through the clearing and sparks snapped like tiny bones. Ethan moved what was left of his gear close to Rick and Gabbie's tent. Gabbie cooked dinner with shaking hands, dropping a can opener twice before Rick gently took it from her. "We eat, we rest, and at first light we go," Rick said. Ethan gave a bitter little laugh. "First light? Yeah. If this place lets morning come." "Do not say that," Gabbie said. The forest beyond the fire had become a wall of black trunks and white fog. The mist did not drift like normal mist. It gathered in slow pockets between the trees, round and pale, like clouds that had come down to watch them breathe. Then the screaming started. It came from far off at first, a woman's scream, full of grief and terror, rising through the holler until the hair lifted on Rick's arms. It cut off, and for 3 seconds, the clearing was silent. Then came the roar. Low, deep, animal at first, but it bent into something else, a hoarse, wild, monkey-like shriek that bounced from ridge to ridge. Gabbie covered her ears. "There are no monkeys here," Ethan said, shaking so badly he almost dropped his knife. Rick whispered, "Could be a cat. A bobcat, maybe." The sound came again, closer this time, and it was not one voice. There were several. A woman screaming. A man sobbing. Something chattering high in the branches. Something breathing just outside the ring of firelight. Gabbie turned slowly. White mist rolled between 2 trees, and inside it, for less than a second, she saw the shape of a person standing sideways, thin as smoke, head tilted toward the camp. "Rick," she breathed. Rick saw it too, and every argument he had left died in his throat. Ethan stumbled backward. "I am not staying here. I am not staying here." "Don't run," Gabbie said. "Ethan, please, don't run." A heavy thud landed behind Ethan's tent. Dirt jumped. The ruined nylon fluttered. Then something began dragging through the leaves, slow and deliberate, as if a large piece of wood was being pulled by a hand none of them could see. Rick grabbed a burning branch from the fire and held it out. "Show yourself." The dragging stopped. For a moment, nothing moved. Then a rotten tree stump, half as wide as a man's chest, burst out of the dark and flew straight into the campfire. The impact was explosive. Flames scattered. Sparks blew into the air. Gabbie screamed. Rick threw his arm over his face. Ethan bolted before anyone could stop him, sprinting into the fog in the opposite direction of the trail. "Ethan!" Rick shouted. But Ethan did not turn back. Rick grabbed Gabbie's hand. He did not think about the packs, the food, the flashlights, or the warning Donald had given them. He only thought about getting her away from the thing breathing in the trees. They ran the other way, crashing through wet branches, slipping in mud, stumbling over roots, while behind them the forest filled with voices. Some voices screamed. Some voices laughed. One voice, very close to Rick's ear, whispered Gabbie's name. They ran until their lungs burned and the firelight disappeared. They ran until the fog swallowed the camp completely. At last, Rick pulled Gabbie under the leaning shelter of a rock ledge, and they crouched there in the wet dark, holding each other so tightly that neither could tell whose heart was pounding harder. Gabbie whispered, "Where is Ethan?" Rick closed his eyes. From somewhere far away, Ethan screamed once. Then the mountain went silent again. Rick and Gabbie found camp again close to dawn, although neither of them could explain how. They had wandered for hours, following the sound of the creek when it appeared, losing it when it faded, moving through fog so thick their hands vanished when they stretched them forward. Twice, Rick heard Ethan calling from the trees, but each time Gabbie held him back, crying quietly and saying, "That is not him. Rick, that is not him." When they stepped into the clearing, the fire was dead. The tent sagged in the rain. Their packs lay open. Every piece of food had been arranged on the ground in a long crooked line leading toward the forest, like bait, or like an invitation. Ethan was gone. Rick found enough signal on a ridge after nearly an hour of climbing and called the ranger station with a voice that barely sounded human. Donald Mercer arrived before noon with 2 volunteer searchers, a radio, emergency blankets, and a face that told Rick he had expected this long before the call came in. Donald listened without interrupting as Rick and Gabbie explained the sounds, the mist, the thrown stump, the separation, and Ethan's scream. The volunteer searchers exchanged looks, but Donald did not smile, did not mock them, and did not call it panic. He only asked one question. "Did either of you answer when it called your name?" Gabbie's eyes filled with tears. "I almost did." Donald looked toward the tree line. "Then be grateful you almost did." The first day of searching turned up nothing but impossible things. Ethan's boot print appeared in mud beside the creek, then vanished in the center of a dry rock shelf. A strip of his jacket hung from a branch 12 feet above the ground, folded over neatly, not torn. His pocket knife was found open and stuck into a rotten stump, blade first, handle pointing toward camp. Donald knelt beside it for a long time. One volunteer said, "Could be a prank." Donald did not look up. Then it is a prank by somebody who knows how to leave no tracks in wet ground. That evening, Donald ordered everyone back to the clearing. He radioed for more help, but weather closed the access road, and the larger search team would not arrive until morning. Rick wanted to keep looking. Gabbie did too, even though she could barely stand. Donald blocked the trail with his body. "No," he said. "Darkness is not just darkness here. Not tonight." Rick stepped toward him. "My friend is out there." Donald leaned close enough that Rick could smell rain and old coffee on him. "I know. And if you run after every voice that sounds like him, tomorrow I will be looking for 3 people instead of 1. Night came heavy. They sat beneath a tarp, wrapped in emergency blankets, while Donald kept the fire low and steady. He told them there were hollows in those mountains where sound carried wrong, where animals screamed like women, where fog formed suddenly, and where fear could make people see shapes that were not there. Then, after a long silence, he said, "But there are also places my grandfather told me not to enter, and this was one of them." Gabbie looked up. "Why?" Donald stared into the fire. "Because some things in old woods learn people. They learn how we sound when we are hurt. They learn how we call for help. They learn which voice will make someone step off the trail." From the trees, Ethan's voice called, weak and shaking. "Rick, help me." Rick stood so fast the blanket fell off his shoulders. Donald grabbed his arm. Again, the voice came, closer now. "Rick, please." Gabbie covered her mouth and began sobbing. Donald lifted his radio, spoke in a low voice, and told the volunteers not to move. Then he raised his eyes toward the black trees. "That is not Ethan," he said. The voice changed. It became Donald's voice, deeper, rougher, repeating the same words he had spoken at the ranger station. "If the forest goes quiet, you pack up and leave." Then every bug, bird, and frog in the mountain stopped at once. They found Ethan on the second day, just after the rain stopped. By then, the proper search team had arrived, but nobody joked, nobody shouted casually, and nobody wandered alone. Donald had them move in pairs, slow and careful, marking trees with bright tape and calling Ethan's name only at set intervals. Every time someone called, the woods seemed to listen before answering with dripping leaves. Near midday, one of the volunteers spotted fabric beneath a fallen oak. At first, it looked like a pile of discarded clothes tucked into the hollow beneath the trunk. Then Gabbie saw Ethan's hand. He was curled inside the dark space beneath the fallen tree, knees drawn tight to his chest, arms locked over his head as if he had been hiding from something too tall to crawl in after him. His lips were pale. His skin was cold. His eyes were open, fixed on the narrow strip of daylight under the bark. But he was alive. Rick dropped beside him. "Ethan. Ethan, man, it's me." Ethan did not blink. Donald wrapped him in a blanket and spoke softly, the way someone speaks to a frightened animal. "You're safe now. We got you." At the word safe, Ethan made a sound so small it barely counted as a voice. "No." They carried him down the mountain in silence. At the hospital, the doctors said exposure had nearly killed him. They said shock could explain why he did not speak. They said the scratches on his arms probably came from branches, and the mud under his fingernails probably came from crawling. They said trauma does strange things to the mind. Rick wanted to believe them. Gabbie tried. Ethan's parents came and sat by his bed for 2 days, begging him to say anything. He only stared at the window, even when the blinds were closed. If a nurse rolled a cart past his door and one wheel squealed, Ethan curled up and pressed both hands over his ears. On the third night, Donald visited him alone. Rick and Gabbie were outside in the hallway when Ethan finally spoke. They could not make out every word, only pieces. "It wore the fog," Ethan whispered. Then, after a long pause, "It sounded like my mother." Donald asked something too quietly to hear. Ethan began to cry. "It had no feet," he said. "It stood in the trees, and it had no feet, and every time I looked away, it got closer." The next sound was a scream so sudden and raw that nurses came running. After that, Ethan stopped speaking again. Weeks passed. Rick and Gabbie went home, but they did not go back to their old lives. Rick sold his camping gear. Gabbie could not stand the smell of wood smoke. Neither of them slept well when rain touched the windows. Donald filed the official report as a lost hiker recovery with severe exposure, possible animal disturbance at camp, and weather-related disorientation. That was the version everyone accepted, because it was clean, ordinary, and safe. But Donald kept a private note in his desk drawer, written in pencil beneath Ethan's case number. No tracks around damaged tent. Food arranged in line toward forest. Subject reported entity without feet. Multiple witnesses heard mimicry. Total silence observed twice. 1 month after the rescue, Rick visited Ethan at his parents' house. Ethan sat in the living room beneath a quilt, thinner than before, eyes locked on a blank television screen. For almost an hour, he said nothing. Then the wind moved through the trees outside. Ethan turned his head. Rick felt the room grow cold. From beyond the window, somewhere in the woods behind the house, a woman's scream rose into the evening, long and thin, bending slowly into a chattering, monkey-like cry. Ethan stood so fast the quilt fell to the floor. He looked at Rick, and for one terrible second, Rick saw the thing Ethan had carried back from the mountain living behind his eyes. Then Ethan whispered, "It followed the sound of my name." He ran out the front door before anyone could stop him, barefoot into the yard, screaming until his voice broke, while his parents chased after him and Rick stood frozen in the doorway. Across the tree line, a white cloud of mist drifted between two dark trunks. It did not move with the wind. It waited. And from inside that mist, in Rick's own voice, something called, "Gabbie."
Thank you for your support and thank you for tuning into our stories. Some are fiction and some are based on a true event. We would really appreciate it if you could like this video, share, and subscribe to our channel. Stay tuned for a new story every day.